Thank you so much for coming. Today is an important day. Today is the Community Resource Exchange, and it's also the Changemakers Rally, where we're convening leaders from our community to have a meaningful discussion on solutions and the issue of homelessness and how we can move faster to address the problem. To kick us off this morning, please give a warm welcome to United Way of King County Board Chair Kathy Surace-Smith.
Thank you and good morning. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. I'm one of the volunteers downstairs this morning, and I know you're going to go see it later, and you're really in for quite a great experience, meeting some of our guests today, seeing the energy and the passion of our volunteers, and it's just an amazing experience. So you've got something really exciting to look forward to if you haven't been there already. I want to talk a little bit about homelessness. You're all aware that homelessness was declared a crisis at the end of 2015 in our community. And over the last 2 years, there are 11,600 people have experienced homelessness. Some are living in shelters, thousands more living on the street, approximately 5,000 people. 300 people over the last 2 years have died on our streets, and that is absolutely unacceptable. There's progress being made, but it's not enough, and we at United Way are working to contribute to helping those who are on the street and who are otherwise homeless through a few programs that we think are really unique and really important for getting people into homes and getting people jobs so they can stay in those homes. Affordable housing is a key component of this crisis. Two of our programs, one of them you'll see downstairs, it's called Jobs Connect program, and essentially what we're doing is connecting homeless people looking for jobs with work, with employers to fill those jobs. We're working with partners like the Millionaire Club. We're scaling the partners we have from 1 to 10 this year, and we're really looking to invest more resources in that, and those of our clients who have told us they really have benefited from it. In fact, when you're downstairs, you will see Jobs Connect is actually at CRE, and we actually have employers who are hiring on the spot today, and we're hoping that some of our guests will walk away with jobs today. The other program is Streets to Home. It's a flexible dollars that we use to help keep people in their homes or help them find a home. We've helped 584 people so far to move into housing. Average cost is less than $1,000 per person. Again, we're expanding the program. I'd like to introduce you to someone who's here today who was actually a beneficiary of our Jobs Connect program. So I'm going to ask Justin to come on up and help tell his story. Come on up, Justin.
Good morning, good morning. Good to see everybody here.
Yep. So Justin came from Arizona a few years ago, and I wanted to ask him first to just tell us a little bit about his experience, why he came to Seattle, and what he found when he got here.
Okay, I'm originally from Los Angeles. I moved to Phoenix for a job. I lived in Phoenix for about 5 years, and so the job ended up moving, and so, I was always a fan of the rainy weather, but I'd never been to, like, the city and everything, and so if you guys ever been to Phoenix, you know. And so came to Seattle. I figured, I'm a fan of the rainy weather and things like that. So, it was like kind of put 2 and 2 together, kind of moved out here.
And Justin, when you got here, tell us a little bit about your job search and your search for housing.
Okay, I got here. I had a little money saved up, and I thought I was, pretty okay, well off, but I didn't kind of know about the no rent control in Seattle and things like that. So I got here and I had some immediate choices to make, and those choices were either I can, move into an apartment right away, or I could, live on the streets. So it was pretty much a decision between either house or food. So I decided to choose food, and so didn't know the city, didn't know anybody. So walking around the city, I just kind of ran into a bunch of people who pointed me into some resources. And the first resource was like Union Gospel Mission and things like that, where I can sleep at night. And so once I did that, you know, still looking for work and everything, I ran into like places like the Urban Rest Stop, where I can wash my clothes, take showers and things. So I was on my way, and so I got involved with the Millionaires Club, did a couple odd jobs for the Millionaires Club, and found out about the Job Connects program. So I kind of took the ball with that and ran, and became an ambassador for downtown, Metropolitan Improvement District. And so I kind of figured that wasn't enough. And so I found out the population, I found out about the homelessness and the drug crisis and things out here. So I figured I could do more. So I figured, you know, I'd become a safety ambassador for the Metropolitan District. And so I could kind of work with the homeless and do things like that. So that's pretty much my goal.
Tell us a little bit more about how Jobs Connect helped you get your current job.
Well, Job Connects gave me steady employment. You know, that's always a good thing. And I always, I had to find an apartment and things like that. So through the Millionaire Club, I got an apartment. Like I said, I'm steady working, doing things like that. So I'm just pretty much appreciative of the resources.
Terrific. And so what's next for you?
Oh, like I said, I've seen the epidemic of the drug and the homeless and things like that. So I have a little outreach work in my background. So I kind of want to do a little more outreach work. So I'm thinking maybe going to nursing school or something like that. So that's pretty much the next game plan.
All right. Terrific. Thank you, Justin. So our next speaker is CEO of United Way, John Fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. I'm John Fine. I'm the CEO at United Way of King County, and I really want to welcome you here. I'm excited to see so many people downstairs helping, and I'm excited to see so many people here at our Changemakers Rally, where we can talk about how we can extend the things we're doing downstairs from one day to every day. So at United Way, our business is together. We're looking to build a community where people have homes, students graduate, and families are financially stable. Today's very much about the people having a home, where we have a lot of people in our community who don't, and we want to change that dynamic. And the only way we're going to change that dynamic is by doing it together. It's great to see so many people that we can help just with some of the basics, and we're doing that downstairs. But we want to do it more than just the basics. We want to do it in ways both downstairs and on an ongoing basis that can change the dynamic over time. CRE is a great illustration of what United Way can do and how we can do those things. We're about to hear from a panel of distinguished leaders who are doing things in their organizations, and we're looking forward both to hearing from them and getting your questions, which I hope you'll fill out the cards so we can get a robust discussion going about what we're doing. But before we do that, I'd now like to welcome someone who cares a whole lot about this issue and is doing a lot with us and for our community. It's someone who is awfully passionate about helping everyone, all the citizens in our community. She's doing it with passion, with energy, with commitment, and with a great deal of caring. Please welcome Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan.
Thank you, John, for that kind introduction. I want to thank everyone who's here today and trying to make, a difference in people's lives. I also want to thank the people who are downstairs. I was able to go on the periphery, I want to go down, for the courage it takes for them every day to get through their days. And what we're seeing today is what happens when community comes together and gives some basic services and dignity to people, from taking care of their pets to a friendly welcome to a haircut to jobs, those things that many of us who live in the warm take for granted every single day. But it changes people's lives, and that's why these t-shirts are not just t-shirts. It really is changing people's lives, But what we have to do as a city, we have to commit over time to make this change in people's lives for every day of their lives, for every day of their lives. I want to thank the United Way of King County and all the members of our community who are here today and are downstairs serving people. The looks and smiles on people's faces as they walked in the room and walked around the room was remarkable. But the looks of faces, people lined up to go in the room, was also something that will stay with me as mayor. Wondering if they would get in the room, if they would get what they need, what would happen to them tomorrow or when they walked out of that room. That's what we have to commit ourselves to. When we say change makers, we have to mean change makers. I believe that solving the issue of affordability and the related issue of homelessness is really the moral challenge of our time. It is something that we face as a city that is really changing the soul and character of our city. What gives me hope? What gives me hope are you and everyone downstairs who say, yes, we can make a difference. We want to make a difference. We will make a difference. And as your mayor, I tell you, every day I think about this issue, almost all day, trying to think, how do we change the dial and move forward on this issue and pull together? I will tell you that we've done things. My approach to addressing homelessness is we must have a three-pronged approach, I believe. First and foremost, we have to get people inside. We have to provide people homes and the services they need to stay in homes. Two, so that requires building more affordable housing for both middle income and affordable housing for lower income. Second, we have to have more short-term options. It's not acceptable for people to be living in the streets in tents and vehicles. So that's why we have to have shorter-term options while not being satisfied that those are long-term options. And a prong we rarely talk about, which I think is critical and part of what today is, we have to, in the long term, create true economic opportunity for everyone. If we don't attack those root causes of homelessness, more people will continue to fall into homelessness than we can house safely. That's happening every year in King County and Seattle. It's one reason why I am so focused not just on homelessness as an issue and urgency of today, but how do we make sure that Seattle is a place where there's true economic opportunity for everyone in this city, and particularly for our youth. I want every kid in Seattle Public Schools and schools across Seattle to know there is a place for them, there is opportunity for them, and we will make a difference in their lives so they can make a difference in their own lives, their community lives, and our city. One of the ways we're going to do that is with the Seattle Promise. We will make sure that every Seattle Public School kid who graduates from high school gets 2 years at college, free, no debt burden. And we know it works. If you go and look at the 13th year program, which has been up and running, it will tell you what you need to know. Most of them are students of color, first in their family to go to college, from immigrant and refugee families, and they are thriving and doing so well. If our students do what we ask them to do, we have to be there for them. And so I am committed in the long term to make sure that we provide that, we close the opportunity gap, that we really make sure that kids coming out of school today, that what we have is a school to economic opportunity pipeline, not school to prison pipeline, not school to homelessness pipeline, but really something that will change the character of our neighborhoods in our city. We've done a lot. I was able to, in my first weeks of mayor, announce $100 million in affordable housing that will provide more housing for people. But we know that as much as we spend on the long-term solutions, we have to do something on the short term. We have to bring more people inside. We have to give them their services. And we have to realize it takes us all. It takes us all. It's not just government, and it is not just Seattle government. It is business, it is philanthropy, and it has to be a regional response. Yesterday, I was very fortunate to be able to sit with the first meeting of the elected leaders for the One Table process, which is a regional group trying to look at the root causes of homelessness and see how we can stem the tide of people falling to homelessness. And there is no denying it. We have got to dismantle some of the vestiges of systemic racism if we want to get ahead of this issue. The data is just too clear about who is falling into homelessness, who doesn't have economic opportunity. If you look at African Americans and their disproportionate number living on the streets, if you look at our Native Americans, the first people here who are now more marginalized than probably any other group. We have to recognize that, we have to be honest about it, and we have to be willing to change that dynamic. But those issues don't stop at city borders. We can't fix it alone in Seattle. We've got to work as a region, and then as a state, and then as a nation to ultimately change how we operate. And things like criminal justice reform to make sure that people aren't being discharged from jails into homelessness and not have opportunity. To our foster care system, which we know disproportionately impacts people of color. You look at all the factors on where people are falling into homelessness, and it is something we can change. We have the power, we know how to do it, we need the political will, and we need to come together with these solutions. Business, philanthropy, government, regional-wide, and people who are just everyday people like we see downstairs who are saying, I'm taking time off today, and I'm gonna do something to help people. We need to get that on a day-to-day basis, come together as communities, and make sure that we are committed not just to one day of change, but to systems of change. To see that we can do this, that we owe it to our brothers and sisters, that we will rise up and say that Seattle can be a better city, a better place, and set the model for our country. I think we can. We know it's a challenge. We know it's overwhelming some days. You look at the faces of people who are suffering and hurting, but we have what it takes. We must have what it takes. And if we say, we know that there's women and children or parents and children, and we know what that number is, we have a waiting list number finally, we're gonna get a strategy to drive that number to zero. And we're gonna look at the people who have behavioral health issues, whether it's mental health or substance abuse. And we're gonna say, we will make sure that we find a way that you can actually have treatment on demand and support services, and that you get housing first. We know what works. We just need to do it and have the collective will to do it. And we need to pull together as a community and say, we will do it, we must do it, and we can do it. And I think at the end of the day, we know it's intractable. It's years in the making. It's many, many factors that lead to it. But we can't be daunted. And seeing the Changemaker t-shirts today and the look on people's faces, and most importantly, the faces of people who want hope, let's not just give them that hope today. Let's give them that hope that they will have a tomorrow and a next week and a next year where their lives can be better, their children's lives can be better, and as a result, we as a city will be much better. So thank you so much for your time. I can't stay for the panel, but I'm going to take a couple questions.
Fantastic. So if you have questions, we're going to ask that you write them down for the mayor and pass them this way to one of the wonderful United Way volunteers who are in the audience. And while we're doing that, Mayor, let me just ask you the first question, which is, if you looked out 5 to 10 years from now, can you talk about the vision about what's different in the city of Seattle with respect to homelessness?
That is such a great question. I think we have to look at it holistically. And every choice we make today, we have to be thinking about not just how do we get through this emergency, but what are we really doing to build that city of the future? And so I look not just 5 and 10 years, I really look through my children's eyes, you know, more and more. And I think when my kids are my age, what do I want Seattle to look like? Will it be a city they love as much as the city I love? And so it's going to be a holistic approach. We have to have good transit going to every part of the town. And around that transit is built density so people can walk, shop, bike, all in their neighborhoods. And those neighborhoods consist of people of every background, every economic background, every race, every faith. And we are very purposeful and intentional of making sure that in our city, we are reflecting those values that we espouse. And the welcome sign is up, and we know that we will become that city that is denser, that has grit, that has turbulence and difficulties. But at the core, we are thinking about what kind of city do we want to be? Not just today, but for 20 years, and make those decisions today for the next generation and the generation after that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Mayor. First question from the audience: what steps are being taken to prevent youth homelessness in schools?
It is such a great question. We talk about some of those going at the root causes, and youth homelessness, again, disproportionately impacted. So the first thing we have to do is work with homeless youth themselves and let them inform us on what we need to do. You know, we're seeing in way too many places that we're not taking the voices of people who have the lived experience. Too many times that, you know, whether it is youth or people of color or Native Americans, to give us that equity frame, which we have to have. So the first thing we have to do is that. And then we have to give strategies of protection. People have to have a safe place to live. They have to know that they have hope. They have to know that they can be trained in whatever they're interested in, that they can be not just housed, but have access to education and consistency. That's what I hear more and more when I go to, whether it's youth care or other places, those strategies have to be one. And so, again, I think it's a number one of those things, like, we know that there are strategies that work for youth. We have to quit thinking about homelessness as a one-size-fits-all. We have to have strategies for the people experiencing homelessness for their realities. And so a solution that may work for youth may not work for the moms and kids living in cars. It may not work for the person with behavioral health issues who's struggling. So we have to be able to get populations and see, how do we help people where they are to get them what they need?
Excellent. Thank you. I wonder if you could say a quick word about the role for SPD, Seattle Police Department, in the homelessness crisis in the city. I mean, obviously there's a bunch of different opinions and perspectives about how active the police force should be. I know there's a new chief that's underway. Could you talk a little bit about just your vision for how to use SPD?
Yes, it is a very complicated thing. I spent yesterday evening, I was at Fire Station 10, which is located right near Pioneer Square, and have spent time at the other precincts. Our fire department and police department have become the first responders to people experiencing homelessness in a wide range of ways. The first healthcare responders. When I came in as mayor, I wanted to get a sense for where were what we call sometimes hotspots. Where do we see activity? Where's police? Where's fire? Where's issues we have in the city? Top 5 spots responding for both fire and police are where our shelters are. 3 of the top 5, I think it was. You know, and it's not a surprise. There is a huge unmet healthcare need, for example, and it's often medics. So those police and fire are having to work together on the street with populations to navigate their realities. They also accompany our navigation team, our outreach workers, to go work with people in the encampments, see what services they need, check up on people, see if they're okay, try to find people who they know need medical services, who haven't gone to get medical services. And there's that rub to make sure that we are not criminalizing poverty, and to make sure that we can have a response that is not a criminal justice response. You know, we got some of the first reports back from our One Table effort and those people looking at the criminal justice response. And what we hear over and over again is we need more diversion programs. We need more programs where people who need that help get the systems. And Seattle Police Department is very much a partner in that. And so they also, they have to ensure public safety, but they also know and deal every day with people who are experiencing homelessness.
Thank you, Mayor. So I know you're going to be pressed for time here, so let's see if we can squeeze in 1 or 2 more questions. This one is about market
You tell me
rate.
not to filibuster?
Yeah. This one is about market rate rents. So how can we ask market rate landlords to lower a small percentage of their units to allow for a more affordable rate to their property taxes, I think is, and
Yeah.
to lower their property taxes.
So we have the program I think they're referring to allows people who build multifamily or have multifamily to get a tax exemption if they offer low-income units within there. We're trying to expand that program. I think it's a good program. I've talked to Speaker Chop about it. It requires state law. We have some in place. We would like to expand it because I think we have to do all tools. First thing we got to do is we have to build more affordable housing as quickly as we can. We just have to. And we have to build more the missing middle income housing. You know, the people who are, you know, the workers who are making decent wages, you know, can't live in the city anymore. There's nowhere, they're getting squeezed out. So we have to have programs, and I see friends in here I've talked to about this, you know, to really push to make sure that we don't lose that missing middle so that you can have your teachers and people who work in our restaurants and our service providers can actually live near their jobs. So we need to do both of those strategies. So I think that there, again, there is no one magic bullet. You know, we are living in a city that had disproportionate growth in a very short period of time with people coming in for jobs that paid a lot of money who then could pay a lot in rent. And so we saw this explosive growth in what's called market rate. We're seeing for the first time rents cool a little bit and more coming online. So we're hoping that that drops the price of the market rents. But we know the reality is that middle rent and that low income, you know, it's rarer than a unicorn. And we've got to make sure that people can stay in the city. So we got to use all tools.
Excellent. So let me just ask you one last question, which is you've now been in office for 2 months?
No, it feels like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Barely getting used to me. It's a little over 100 days.
Okay, 100 days. So what is the biggest surprise for you? What regarding homelessness, what did you find out as mayor that you didn't know before you got this job?
I won't say it's a surprise, but I think there is an even deeper fatigue than I realized when I was running for the office across the board with everyone. From the people who are experiencing homelessness, whether there will ever really be a change, to the service providers as to whether they really have the resources to make a difference, to the public not knowing how they can help. And I will tell you the thing that buoys me though, is I have never heard anyone in all the places I go say, we don't need to do more. Everybody wants to do more. They want a plan though, and they want to see that they can make a difference. And so I think that it's very critical for us that are in government to have that clear pathway and targets and goals to say, here's what we think we can do to change homelessness for parents with children. And here's our target, and we're going to work towards it together as a region. And we're going to have service providers do this, communities of faith do that, business and philanthropy do that, and together, we will solve it together. If we each take part of the pie, the hope is then we can have the whole pie be served.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for our mayor.
Thank you very much.
So much. So as we do a little stage shifting here, I want to just say a couple of words to you about what's going on downstairs. How many people are new to the Community Resource Exchange today? Oh, great, fantastic. This is one of the signature events of the United Way. It is a fantastic opportunity to engage on a very personalized level with somebody who's experiencing homelessness. And I would just encourage you, if you haven't done so already, to spend some time downstairs. I think the realization that will go through your heart and mind as you engage with the clients downstairs is the recognition that they're not any different from any of us in this room. And that they're but for the grace of God to go each one of us. And I think that revelation is important because I think when you go through something that's as personalized as the event that we have here today, what you walk away with is a totally different view of homelessness. A lot of us try to stigmatize and compartmentalize things, and I just hope that each and every one of you will have the same experience that I've had and so many other people who've gone through this over the years have had with respect to this issue, and then we take it personally. And as the mayor said, she needs our help. She's not going to be able to solve this by herself. This is going to require a coalition of change makers, and I just want to thank each and every one of you for being here today and being one of those change makers. So please give yourselves a little round of applause if you would. So the next part of my assignment, by the way, I'm Blair Taylor. Nobody introduced me, but that's okay. I just get up and start talking when I see microphones and stuff. I was board chairman of the United Way up until the middle of last year, and now I am on the executive committee of the United Way. I've served on the board for about almost 5 years now. And I will just tell you, this is one of the most phenomenal nonprofit organizations in the country, and I've worked with many of them all across the country and even all across the globe. And so this staff, and John Fine, who's over there as the CEO, just continue to do an incredible job. And I would just appreciate it if you would give the staff of the United Way a big round of applause. So we've got a great group of panelists here, and I'm going to call them out. So if you can come up as I call you, I think we're all over stage right. So Raquel Russell is with the Zelo Group. Let's give her a round of applause as she comes to the stage. John Kelly is with Starbucks. No. Lauren McGowan is with the United Way here in Seattle. Let's give her a round of applause. I'm going to butcher your name, by the way. Kira say your last name for me. Zylstra. Kira Zylstra from All Home is here. And then we have a representative from Amazon, Alice Shobe, who's here with us as well. And we have a late addition who was added to the panel, but she's going to be fantastic, is Colleen Echohawk, who's from the Chief Seattle Club. So what a great group of people. It's an honor to be here with all of you, so thank you for taking time from your schedule to be here and join us on a wonderfully cold Seattle day, but an incredibly important topic. I want to start with a question that relates to what's going on downstairs. I just said this is a very personalized event. Part of what you experience downstairs is the engagement and interaction with people who we may pass on the street and otherwise, in some ways, I'll use the term dehumanize. I wonder if any of you have a personal story of how you interacted or engaged with somebody who was homeless and how that may have changed you as much as it may have changed them. Anybody? Yes.
So I'm pleased to say that it's not a story about homelessness, but hopefully preventing one. Which is, for the last 4 years, I've been a mentor to a young woman who's now 18, who is managing a chronic mental health issue and is currently living in housing provided by Navos. And watching her brave struggle to get through school and to really move into that adulthood while managing her health issue, I feel motivated every day to be part of her support system because I know that other women like her have ended up on the streets. So that's my personal one.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Sure. So for me, it's very personal. It's my own story. I am a first-generation American. My parents were immigrants from Jamaica, moved to New York, and thankfully had a great social safety network, which is one of the only reasons why my story is more about housing insecurity than just homelessness. But when I was about 6 years old, our landlord abruptly kicked us out of our apartment. Not because my mom wasn't paying her rent, she was working 2+ jobs in order to pay her rent, but he wanted the unit for a family friend or family member. We ended up staying in the basement of a family friend's home for a little bit over a year. And, you know, although we were one of the lucky ones at 6, 7 years old, when you don't have your own kitchen and you don't have your own space, it raws on you, right? I mean, because it's just like, this isn't your home. You're just a guest in someone else's home. But my mom had that social safety network in order to keep us off the streets and have a place on a roof over our heads. And thankfully was able to get back on her feet and then also paid forward and had family friends, as I grew up, family friends who stayed with us when they were down on their luck. So that was something that was very personal and has driven both my career as well as my personal passion since.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you both for sharing. Any others on that? John?
Just had one quick thought. For the last couple of years, I was working downstairs at the intake, and I would highly encourage you all, for those of you who are new to the CRE, this is an extraordinary event, and it's not one story, it's the collection of, over a 20-minute period meeting 5, 10 different people, and what you realize is that everyone has a journey, everyone has a story that's unique to them. They do not want to be there. They're on a journey and they want to go someplace better, and they're struggling with all kinds of different challenges. But I would encourage you to try that intake. It is emotionally draining. As hard as it is for me, you just realize how hard it is on the other side of that table. But I would encourage you to give it a shot.
Thanks, John. So I just, as an observer of homelessness here in the city of Seattle, which everybody in this audience is, and I certainly am, and I know you all are, the problem does seem to be getting worse in Seattle. It seems to be getting even more acute. I've been here for 6 years, and I've noticed that over that period of time. My question is it really getting worse? And if it is, what's your opinion and perspective on why it's getting worse? And Kira, maybe we can start with you on that.
Sure. I think there's no denying that, yes, the crisis has absolutely gotten worse. I'm sure everyone in this room has a story that they could share about what they have observed and how they've experienced that increase. I would say it's really important to acknowledge both what is happening and what is working in our community, as well as what we need to do more of. I think the mayor spoke to this really significantly around we need more housing. We are absolutely experiencing an affordable housing crisis like we've never seen. And we're not alone in this rising crisis. All along the West Coast and many other communities, we're seeing rising numbers of people experiencing homelessness. And there's system-level inequities happening that are causing that. There are root causes of homelessness that are directly related to institutional racism, to system failures, and we need to address each one of those and not in an isolated manner. So we are seeing, in terms of the affordable housing crisis, we have a chronic and severe shortage of affordable housing that's documented. Along the West Coast, all West Coast states are among the top 25% in that severe shortage. So we need to acknowledge that and really do something to increase the affordable housing while really directly addressing the racism that people are experiencing and the system failures, whether it's lack of access to behavioral health or lack of access to economic opportunity, and all of those are having a dramatic impact. At the same time, as I mentioned, there are good things happening. We have, in 2017, our community housed twice as many households as we did in 2013. So we're continuously doing more and more, but again, that crisis is rising for very specific reasons.
Thank you. And Lauren, just to give us the United Way perspective, getting worse? If so, what's happening? Give us your point of view.
Sure. Yeah. So thank you, Kira. I absolutely agree. We absolutely have an affordable housing crisis. We also haven't done quite enough to prevent people from becoming homeless, and that is both about the housing issues in our community, but it's also about using really targeted data to make sure we keep people in their homes. It is far more expensive, and both from a fiscal perspective and the trauma that people experiencing homelessness face. So the more that we can do to keep people inside, keep them in their homes, the better we'll do as a community to address this problem.
Thank you. Hey, John, the mayor took a question about young kids and homelessness, and I know Starbucks is doing some things with No Child Sleeps Outside, the campaign. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on with that?
Yeah, thanks. If there was a ferry out on Puget Sound with 500 children that was slowly sinking, this city, this county would rally. We'd go and get them. We'd bring them in. We'd keep them warm. But there are 500 children in King County that are sleeping in cars, in parks, at the ends of quiet streets, and they're not here today. They're not here today because They're going to school during the day, their parents are working, but at night, they do not have a place to go. There are hundreds of families that in the wealthiest county, one of the wealthiest counties on the planet, that do not have an emergency shelter. Now, I'm not talking about solving homelessness. I'm not talking that this is simple or easy. But there is one thing that is working, and that's diversion services and creating emergency shelter for the most vulnerable. So Streets to Home is working. It is keeping families in crisis, young women with children running from domestic abuse, very ill children with no place to go for perhaps their short life. They're going to Mary's Place. Thanks to No Child Sleeps Outside, the heroic work of Marty Hartman, who's here today, these things are actually working. Seattle and King County are actually doing something that is saving lives. And there is a gap. We've brought in hundreds of families together collectively as Amazon and Zillow and Microsoft and others, but there's a gap. It's only going to cost maybe the price of maybe a third of one of those beautiful street trolleys that we're building and operating. For the price of maybe a third of that, you can actually provide emergency shelter for all the small children and vulnerable children and families in King County. That's what we're focused on. We think it's actually working. We just need to take a surge and get the job done. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Colleen, we've heard a little bit about the disproportional effect on people of color. Can you talk a little bit about that? Just what's your point of view on the impact of homelessness and the crisis on people of color, particularly in the Native American community?
Sure. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Colleen Echohawk. I'm a member of the Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma, but I also belong to the urban Indian community here in Seattle, which in King County there's 80,000 Native people. We make up about less than 1% of the total population, but in the homeless population, we make up over 7%. And I actually believe in the encampments it's higher. It's probably more around 10 to 12%. So this is the highest rate of homelessness based on a population that we have in our system. And I every day deal with the impact of that. I work in an agency that specifically reaches Native people who are experiencing homelessness. And the crisis continues to reverberate. I always say to our community, our larger Seattle community, prior to 1492, we had a 100% success rate in housing. And we've always known how to house our people. And part of what we need from our community is for us to remember that people of color have demonstrated success in housing people. But government and other kind of actions have taken that away from us. So part of what we have to do as a system, and I think that Seattle, we are the perfect city to do it. I think that we can solve this crisis. We're smart, we have the money, we have the passion for it. And part of what we're gonna have to do is bring back money and funds into people of color agencies. And I'm so glad to see my friend Gordon McHenry back here, who leads Solid Ground. I think that when we have people of color who are leading the way, who understand this crisis in a different way, and I appreciated your first comment, because in my own family, I have someone who grew up in my family who I serve every day at my agency who is homeless. It impacts me in a different way. And I believe that our people of color agencies have, and people of color leaders have, different answers, and we need to be brought to the table, and that is part of the way that we will solve this. Equity is not just about, it's widely important, but it's also about just getting it done. I think that we will be more effective if we understand this situation of homelessness from an equity and race lens.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. Raquel, we've heard a lot about, from the mayor and some of the comments this morning about affordable housing and the crisis there. Can you talk a little bit about how the affordable housing crisis is affecting homelessness?
Sure. I think one thing that, and the mayor spoke on this too, that I want to kind of distinguish is there's the affordable housing for the people who want to buy and rent homes in Seattle, which is a crisis in and of itself. But there's also the finding homes that are affordable for those people who otherwise may face homelessness. And I think sometimes we talk about affordable housing meaning both, and they're very distinct. But what I will say is, from a macroeconomic perspective, the root cause is the same. It's a lack of inventory. And when you have the pressure that Seattle is facing right now when it comes to demand wildly outpacing supply, that pressure gets pushed down the economic ladder, and those on the bottom rung often fall off and end up homeless, or at least housing insecure. There are so many other factors that come into play, and we've talked about some of them. The mayor spoke to them. We'll talk about others, but that issue around supply and demand, it's real. And without that, there's really no way of really solving the problem, or at least addressing the root cause. One of the research that the Zillow has done recently, last year, was groundbreaking research trying to create a methodology connecting rising rents to an increase in homelessness populations. And here in Seattle, with every 5% rent increase, you have about 260 people who end up homeless. And in other cities, the numbers are even more, or even worse. But we know that rising rents are a real thing, and there is a direct correlation to homelessness.
Thank you. I'm going to ask if there are any questions in the audience. Pass them, write them down if you would, and pass them to a United Way staffer. In the meantime, let me just ask a question about jobs, and this can go to Amazon, Starbucks. Lauren, I'd like for you to start, though. Just with respect to getting people to work, how do we do that? How do we connect homeless people to employment opportunities? And I want at least one of the employers who are here to talk about that as well.
Great, thanks. About a year and a half ago, United Way piloted what we call our Jobs Connect program. It was a partnership with the Millionaire Club. And what we found was there was this overwhelming both desire and ability to work among the homeless population. And that program has since scaled. It's now, this year, will help about 1,000 people experiencing homelessness get connected to jobs through a variety of agencies. And it is so clear that we need to do more of that as a community. There's a relatively small amount of money going into jobs programs in our community right now, whether that be through private philanthropy or public funding. And we spend a lot of time trying to get people on, through our coordinated entry system, through our homeless system. Most of those people are going to be waiting for a very, very long time. We need to get more people to get jobs, give them the tools and opportunities to do that, and have an employment-first philosophy, much like we have a housing-first philosophy. Alice, do you want to talk a little bit about how we're having jobs here today at the CRE?
So I'm reflecting as I sit on this panel that I joined Amazon a year ago, and before that I spent the majority of my career working on housing and homeless issues. So it's good to be back with you guys. But I would also say that one of the things I'm really loving about being at Amazon is the energy of the employees. And so I just wanted to say a case in point is that we really had employees that brought this opportunity and said, we're involved with United Way, we want to do more. And one of the things I really appreciated is they didn't only bring the banana stand downstairs and the treasure truck, but they also said, we need to have our recruiters downstairs. And so that really came from our employees saying, we're trying to address homelessness, we should be working on the jobs front too. So, having worked in this field for a couple of decades, I think it's a very old frame that we used to say, we got to work on everything else and then do the job part last. And so we have to shift our kind of mental model around that. And so I am excited, and I really just follow the energy of our employees every day, and so far it's paying off. So.
Hey, John, I want to, before you answer that one, let me just ask you a question that came in from the audience that's specifically directed to Starbucks. So last October.
We did not make this coffee, by the way. This is be a little stronger. It's good. Needs a little stronger.
A disclaimer from Starbucks. Last October, during a forum hosted by the Downtown Seattle Association, the business community expressed frustration that the city council and local leaders were not meeting with them. Starbucks offered to host those meetings. What, if any, type of meetings are taking place between businesses and the mayor and the city or county councils?
I can't speak to most of that because, the mayor has started a one-table initiative, and so she and her focused leadership, which I think has really been missing, has seen the employer community as a solution and not as a target. Unfortunately, most of the city council doesn't really work with us, doesn't reach out, and is not here, by the way. They're invited, but they're not here on Seattle's Seattle's greatest day. Or good, they're good. You're here. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Mayor Durkin, for being here. Kim Wyman, our Secretary of State, is here. Everybody should be here. This is Seattle's greatest day, and I think this is part of what One Table is trying to do, is to bring that employer community together for solutions. And again, we have worked a lot with the employer community on the No Child Sleeps Outside campaign. They have largely given up on the Seattle City Council because it's always a one-way conversation. And it is very hard to rally this business community for any cause because our government keeps on targeting them as a source of funds rather than innovators and solution and problem solvers, which is what we are. So the One Table initiative is a great one. I know United Way and others are involved with it, and I think that's the answer to the question. We will continue to bring the coffee and encourage people to talk together, but I would just add that if you cannot take care of the most vulnerable, if you cannot give a child emergency shelter, the complexities of opiates, of affordable housing, of race. By the way, 2/3 of the families that are sleeping outside are people of color. It's even more disproportionate. It's even more in much of a crisis as any other part of our population. We need focused leadership. We know the decisions. We've got the POPU report with all the solutions. The blueprint is there. We just need to act on the reform.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Another question from our audience for anyone on the panel. Explain keeping people in homes. How does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, when you think about homeless prevention, there's a variety of ways to do that. One is financial assistance, so whether that be emergency rent assistance, eviction prevention dollars, making sure people have the dollars that they need to stay in their homes. Connecting them to other income, whether that be jobs or other income supports. A lot of families don't know they're eligible for things like food stamps or the SNAP program, other public benefits that can help keep them in their homes and become more financially stable. So at United Way, we spend a lot of time through what we call our benefits hubs, connecting people to a variety of financial tools, everything from those public benefits and income supports to financial counseling and coaching. So there's a lot that we can do despite the affordable housing crisis that we have, and the challenges we have. The other thing on prevention is we've got to work through our systems. Too many people are being discharged, whether it be from our justice system, our hospitals, the foster care system. Each and every one of those are going to require policy change and working partnerships that can make sure that people exit directly into housing.
I just want to build on that a little bit and build on what Colleen talked about earlier about communities of color knowing what their communities need. And we need to listen to people. Besides the providers knowing what their communities need, people know what they need. And people know why they are where they are. So particularly listening to people of color about their experiences and whether they're experiencing homelessness or housing instability, they know what it takes. And we need to be able to be responsive to those needs, and very quickly.
If I can just add a quick story that aligns all of this work. My organization recently got HSD funding for an outreach worker. We were really excited. We started partnering with a lot of folks, including Mary's Place, and we just had this incredible amount of funding coming in that's funding Native people to go out and serve other Native people who are experiencing homelessness. Our outreach worker happened to run into a family that was sleeping in a car. They had a 10-month-old baby and another baby almost 2 years old. They've been sleeping in the car for a long time. They said, well, here's all these different places, and they said, we don't feel comfortable there. That's not a place for us. And it was through Streets to Home money that we had to get families back into housing that now this family is in an apartment in Renton. They're thriving. The parents are working. It's going so great. But what it took was someone who looked like them, someone who understood their story, someone who was going to be able to not make them feel ashamed about the situation they were in, because they felt very ashamed and they felt very lonely and they felt very full, just so much trauma. Mm-hmm. But it's, I think, a beautiful story because it kind of connects all these things we're talking about with these different pots of money that are making a huge, huge impact.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So just on this, it's come up in a couple of ways, but the notion of those who are facing behavioral health issues, what are the approaches there that may differ? How should we be handling that? Especially somebody who may not be able to get a job. What are we doing there?
I can speak to that partially because I've been participating in the one table process and specifically in a work group surrounding behavioral health needs. And I think one of the really important parts of that process is that we do have people with lived experience in those work groups generating solutions. And I'd say one of the biggest themes that has come up is the need to bring services where people are and make use of peer guides, peer navigators, and basically have people help people. Folks that have been through these challenges and have seen it from their own perspective and have had challenges navigating getting to the service that they need, they're in the best position to really help others. And creating community locations where that can occur, that it doesn't just have to happen in institutional settings. So really creating that immediate access and utilizing peers has been a huge theme in that conversation.
Like that. Thank you. So we're getting near the end of our time with our illustrious panel, so I have 2 more questions for you all. The first one is, what have you seen outside of Seattle that's blown your mind about an approach to homelessness? What else could we be doing that's going on somewhere else in the country that we should be thinking about bringing here? Anything?
So Barbara Poppy, who is President Obama's homelessness czar, has worked with the cities of Salt Lake City and Houston and saw demonstrable progress of reducing populations experiencing homelessness. Those are models. Every city is different, and the West Coast is different, and our problems are different. We have a unique problem, which is in her report, which is we do have a disproportionate number of small families living in cars outdoors. It is a unique Seattle problem, but there are models to solve it in Houston and Salt Lake City.
Thank you, John. Anyone else?
I think a lot of some of the successes I've seen elsewhere are things that we're doing and we just need to scale up. We need to do more and do more of what we are already doing. A lot of folks here have talked about streets to home and the diversion approaches that we're utilizing. These are really important solutions that are addressing a crisis in the moment and identifying from that individual's perspective, from that family's perspective, what do they need in that moment?
What's stopping? Is that just a money issue? What's stopping the scale?
It's a money issue and it's a capacity issue of making sure that we have people in the right places for addressing that crisis in the moment. So that's why Streets to Home has been so successful where they're doing it.
I think the only thing that I'd add to that, we have to be more decisive. You know, as a community, we do have a lot of money, we have a lot of resources, we need more, we do need more policy change, and we've got to do more, and we've got to do it quicker, and we've got to make decisions. And our current decision-making structure within our homeless system isn't allowing us to do that. So we've got to make a decision to make some changes and do them.
Love it. Okay, that's great. All right, we're almost done, but I want to do just a quick lightning round of questions. So 30 seconds for each panelist who feels like they want to answer this. You don't have to. But if you could look out a year from now and there was one change that you'd like to see in the city or county that happens with respect to homelessness, what would that one change be? 30 seconds. Who wants to go first? I stumped the panel. It's great.
Well, I think I would add that every single policy that comes out of King County and also in the city of Seattle has at the end of it, and how does this affect people of color? How is this fitting in our race and equity lens?
Love it. Great. Fantastic.
I know Amazon has a youthful reputation, but I'm going to say on a personal level, I think really taking on the silver tsunami that's coming and thinking about seniors and what we should be planning and getting ahead of.
Nice. Thank you. That's excellent.
Full-scale support for more affordable housing and in communities of color.
Thank you.
A new decision-making process for all of our homeless investments and systems.
Excellent. John.
Amen to that. $68 million will close the gap and bring all families inside for emergency shelter. No child should ever sleep outside in King County.
Excellent. Thank you.
We have recommendations from the Poppy report, which has already been mentioned. The one table effort is underway, which will have recommendations to actually see some of those recommendations implemented, which goes back to the critical decision-making aspect of Seattle.
Fantastic. Let's give a round of applause for our panelists.